Okay, this is a reaction video. This is one from a little bit over a year ago. No, actually under a year ago, actually. This was late 2021. 10 fastest dying cities in the United States. This is from the World According to Briggs. Please click like, share, and subscribe for him. And like, share, and subscribe for me. But let's see what the 10 fastest dying cities are in the United States.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the World According to Briggs, and a look at cities that have people flooding out of them. The natural order of things says that cities, states, towns, and even countries should grow their population every single census, so like every 10 years. If they're near zero growth, there's some problems in that location. If they actually lose population, they got some big problems going on there. Most of the time it has to do with employment, economy, some kind of money situation. You also get people leaving because of crime, and occasionally you'll see a mass exodus after a major natural disaster like a hurricane or a, Nickelback concert. Out of almost 300 of the largest cities in the...
Well, I can't really say anything about a Nickelback concert, but yeah, he's true. That is true. Mostly it's very little of it has to do with weather. I mean, like hurricanes in the south. Occasionally a hurricane will come up north and hit New York City or the Northeast, but usually it has to do with the economy.
The U.S. only 28 lost population in that 10-year span from 2010 to 2020. These are the 10 cities who lost the highest percentage of their population. Stay till the end and I'll tell you about some that you probably thought were going to be on the list but weren't. All right, let's take a look. Number 10, Mobile, Alabama. Mobile's one of those cities that every other census they lose population. This has been going on since the 1960s where they gained about 57%, which is solid. 1970s they lost 6%, 80s gained 5%, 90s lost 2%, 2000 they gained 1%, and then the last two census they've actually lost 1.9 in the 2010 census, and now in 2020 they lost 4.1. So why are people leaving Mobile? Well, crime, opportunity, and poverty are pretty much their biggest problem. They either don't have enough jobs, their unemployment is usually a little above the national average. When it comes to the jobs they do have, not a lot of them are really good paying jobs. This forces people to seek better opportunities elsewhere. They also have a pretty high crime rate. Their crime rate is actually 125% higher than the national average. Their violent crime rate is 73% higher. That'll chase people out. Mobile is a beautiful city. I've been there several times. I really like it.
I've never been to Mobile, Alabama, but he's right about that. You know, crime rate and not very good paying jobs will do that to you. But yeah, Mobile, Alabama. I only heard good things about Alabama. I've never heard really bad things about Alabama, but he is correct about that. So that sort of stuff.
Love the people there, great food, beautiful old city. It's just they can't keep people in there because of employment and crime. They sort of took it in the pants too during the pandemic. They have a lot of cruise ships that leave Mobile Bay. They didn't have any of that during the pandemic. But that's getting back to normal next year, so they'll be doing a little better there. Have more jobs and some extra income coming into the city. From 2010 to 2020, Mobile lost 4.1% of their population, going from about 195,000 to 187,000.
You know, and if you've never visited the American South, and I've never been to Alabama, but I've been through like Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, that sort of places, Texas, Louisiana. It certainly is worth taking a look. It is beautiful in the South.
Number 9, Rockford, Illinois.
Now, I've been to Rockford. I played a soccer tournament in Rockford, Illinois when I was in high school. I like Rockford, Illinois.
Rockford is about an hour and a half northwest of downtown Chicago. Like Chicago, it's losing people. Chicago really picked up steam in the last couple of years, but Rockford has been losing people throughout the...
Rockford has, not Rockford, but Chicago has one of the worst mayors in the country. And Lori Lightfoot, she's absolutely awful.
Last decade or so. And that's after 2 decades of solid growth. One of the main reasons
My opinion,
people are leaving Rockford is the violent crime rate. It's actually 209% higher than the national average. Their overall crime is 81% higher. That's horrible, but it sounds kind of nice when you put it up against 209% higher than the national average in violent crime. The other thing chasing people from Rockford into the prairie is the unemployment. Their unemployment numbers are horrible. 81%.
Yeah, more often than not, it has to do with jobs and money, as it usually is. and crime is usually a big thing. Now, crime can be avoided in the United States. I've been on this earth 53 years, and I have pretty much avoided crime for all intents and purposes. And it's usually just knowing where to go and where not to go. More importantly, where not to go. But if crime, again, there's certain places, I don't know if they're on this list, because this is done like about a little bit over a year ago, under a year ago. Sorry, a little under a year ago. Like New York City and Los Angeles, San Francisco, places like that, who probably should be on this list. People are leaving them in droves. I don't know if he knows about these or at this point in time, but Chicago, places like that, there's a lot of crime in these cities.
Percent higher than the national average, and their household income is actually 25% lower than the national average. The national average for household incomes here in the United States is $55,322 a year. That's for a couple. In Rockford, it's $40,143. That's it. From 2010 to 2020, Rockford lost 4.8% of their population, taking them from 152,000 to 145,000. Number 8, St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, the gateway to the West, St. Louis.
We haven't talked about St. Louis too much in, I'd say, the last 6 months or so on this channel. We kind of touched on all their bad neighborhoods and the crime rate they have there and just everything about St. Louis you could talk about. One thing we've never really talked about is how people are flooding out of that place. And it's no wonder they are.
I've been through St. Louis, but I've never actually stayed very long in St. Louis. And the only reason was my parents, when we were going out to California, I think back in 1980, we drove through St. Louis. I did see the arch and all that, but that's the only thing I remember from it.
I mean, you got St. Louis, which is one of like the murder capitals of the United States. Then you got right across the river in Illinois, you got East St. Louis, which is worse. They're just smaller. St. Louis is getting killed in every single stat, no pun intended. I mean, their crime rate's high, everything's high. The violent crime rate in St. Louis, Missouri is 408% higher than the national average. Their total crime rate is 226% higher. This is chasing people out, as you can imagine. Their unemployment rate is 47% higher than the national average. Now, this is about typical for them. Currently, October 2021, the national unemployment rate is 4.6%. St. Louis, it's 7%. Area Vibes gives their schools an F. All those stats kind of paint a pretty bleak picture of St. Louis, and that's why people are leaving. From 2010 to 2020, St. Louis lost 5.5% of their population, taking them from 319,000 to 301,000.
Yeah, people just are not going to stay in places like
a step into a taste unknown.
Number 7, Toledo, Ohio.
Now, I've been to Toledo. That's where LeBron James is from.
Toledo is one of those cities that no one ever asks me to cover. I get requests to do cities every single day, whether it's through comments or emails, just all the time. People want me to, kind of profile their city or even small town. I don't think I've ever gotten one email on Toledo. And I have a good friend from Toledo. He doesn't even bring the place up. I asked him about that one time, and he said, what do we got, the Mud Hens? When it comes to the crime rate, which is chasing...
You got LeBron James, that's where he's from.
People out of Toledo, it's still not as bad as some of the other ones on this list. Give you an example. Their violent crime rate is only 151% higher, where their total crime rate is only 77% higher. As far as cities that suck, that's not terrible, but it's enough to chase people out. That's one of the number one reasons given when people leave Toledo. The other one's got to be jobs. They're leaving for jobs, I'm sure. Like I said before, the unemployment rate is 4.6 right now, and the unemployment rate in Toledo is 7.4. Yeah, that's chase them out of there. They don't have good stats on anything but cost of living. I mean, if no one wants to live there, it's going to be cheap, right? It's like a short sleeve tuxedo. One of those, I'm sure it's like 85% off. From 2010 to 2020, Toledo lost 5.7% of their population, taking them from 287,000 to 270,000.
Now, I've been to Toledo. And I enjoyed Toledo. I didn't find it. I wasn't there very long, mind you, but I enjoyed Toledo for the time that I was there. But again, a lot of this has to, when we're looking at the common denominator, it's crime and income. And are you getting high-paying jobs? Is it worth it to stay there? Now, again, it is cheap to live there, but you're paying the price with the low-paying jobs and the crime rate. But again, the crime rate, you can avoid that if you know how to avoid it, if you know which places not to go to. But still, that's a common denominator with these lists.
Number 6, Cleveland, Ohio.
Now we're back. Now, my sister lives up in Cleveland. Okay, well, she lives in a town called Avon. And I've been to Cleveland. I know a lot of people from Cleveland, and Cleveland is actually a very beautiful city. But I can certainly understand where this is coming from because it also can be a bad place to live as well.
Yep, staying in Ohio, we got the beautiful city of Cleveland, Ohio. Or the mistake on the lake, whatever you want to.
Now, the mistake on the lake comes from their sports teams, not from the city itself. Just for the international people out there, the mistake on the lake is that comes from their sports teams. They have a huge love for their their American football team, the Cleveland Browns, and they don't seem to win a lot of games or win a lot of championships up in Cleveland.
I call it. Actually, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, and there's this guy that's a YouTuber. He's great. Cleveland is doing okay football-wise right now, but they've sucked since forever. One guy used to do these rants in front of it and called their stadium a factory of sadness, which is great. Very accurate for back in the...
And I have a friend who's also a Cleveland Brown fan and probably wouldn't disagree with anything that he just said there.
Today with Cleveland Browns. Anyway, Cleveland, like so many other cities here in the Rust Belt, they got destroyed back in the 19...
Ooh, this guy wearing a West Ham shirt. Is that... Yeah, he's wearing... Oh, we have a fan in Cleveland wearing a West Ham shirt. If you can't see it, he's right... well, you should be able to see it. He's wearing a West Ham shirt.
In the 80s when... Actually, they got destroyed before then.
Where's that Aston Villa? I think
the 70s were rough on them when they started losing different auto industry jobs there. But around 83, 85, that's when
if I got it wrong and it's Aston Villa, I apologize.
The city really started to tank. Cleveland's another one where their crime is chasing people out of the city. Their violent crime rate's 300% higher than the national average, and their total crime is 140% higher than the
Sure it's not because the Cleveland Browns are losing?
National average. And their unemployment numbers right now are borderline on criminal. They're actually double the national average, more than double. They're 10.1%. That's their unemployment rate. 4.6 versus 10.1. But here's a bright spot. They didn't get an F for schools. They got a C. Cause for celebration in Cleveland. From 2010 to 2020, they lost 6.1% of their population, taking them from 396,000 to 372,000.
You know, I mentioned the American South, but I'd also mention the Midwest as well. Yes, I understand what he just said there, but places like Cleveland, like I say, Cleveland is a beautiful city, and I've walked around Cleveland many times, and I certainly would recommend it to anybody.
Number 2, Detroit, Michigan. Hey, look.
Now, this is probably one of the more dangerous cities in the United States, is Detroit, Michigan.
It's our old friend Detroit. They've been losing people since forever, and not in a good way either. The last time Detroit had a positive census, meaning they actually gained people, was the 1950 census, where they gained almost 14%.
Now, there are reasons for that I know, which I'm not going to get into right now because I don't want to get too political in this, but you can really point where Detroit started to go downhill pretty quickly, and this is what happened. This is where it started, and go from there.
Of their population. Since then, they've lost 9.7, 9.3, 20.5. In 1990, it was 14.6 they lost. 2000, 7.5. The last one was 25% of their population left, and this time they lost 10.5% of their population, taking them from 713,000 to 639,000. Now, I could go on why they're leaving and everything like that, but in the numbers, their crime is horrendous and their jobs are horrible too. And this is what really sucks about them. Their violent crime rate is 418% higher than the national average, and that's an improvement year over year, 4 years in a row.
I do not recommend going to Detroit, even though I've been to Detroit before. In fact, the very first World Cup game played in a dome, indoors, was played in Detroit at the Pontiac Silverdome. I know that's not in Detroit, but it's close by. But I do not recommend going to Detroit at all.
Their total crime rate used to be 250% higher than the national average. Right now, it's only 152% higher. All that being said, downtown Detroit has really turned a corner. That's a nice looking city right now, and that's kind of starting to expand. I think in maybe our lifetime, Detroit will return to its old glory. I don't know. They got a long road to go, but they are showing improvement.
I'm not holding my breath on Detroit, even though, like I said, if they are turning a corner, if it is beautiful downtown, that's great. But Detroit really has a bad reputation.
Number 4, Baltimore, Maryland.
I was just in Baltimore, Maryland. My cousin, God rest her soul, recently passed, and we were in Baltimore for her memorial service, so to speak. It wasn't really a memorial service. It was more a remembrance kind of thing, where her friends and family got together and basically just remembered her. It was her favorite city. It was her place which she loved, and she absolutely thought the world of Baltimore. She loved the Baltimore sports team. She loved everything about it, and I was happy to attend and pay my respects. But yeah, I like Baltimore. I've been to Baltimore a couple of times.
Maryland has legendary crime problems, poverty.
And yeah, I do know it has legendary crime problems, but still, I still enjoyed my time in Baltimore.
Numbers so alarming, you'd probably need therapy if you studied them. On a positive note, they have started their tech community is starting to grow, and some companies have been moving in there or have plans to move in there. So that is some good news for Baltimore. Baltimore's a beautiful city with a lot of history. It's just too bad that it's been out of control for a very long time. So why are people leaving Baltimore? Crime and jobs, that's all there is to it. Their jobs aren't terrible compared to some of the other ones on this list. Their violent crime rate is 390% higher than the national average. Total crime rate's only 148% higher. When it comes to their employment numbers, 7% higher than the national average. But their household income is actually 20% lower than the national average. So they don't have a lot of really good numbers here. Well, they have no good numbers. The only thing that they have an A+ in is amenities. They have a lot of things to do, places to eat. It's just you might get killed while you're out trying to get a burger.
I don't know about that, but I saw quite a few places in Baltimore that I really, really liked. Again, my cousin loved it. And whenever I was in Baltimore, I enjoyed it.
Or something. From 2010 to 2020, Baltimore lost 6.7% of their population, taking them from 620,000 to 585,000. Now keep in mind, we are only going by the actual city. Baltimore's metro area, like so many other ones on this list, is huge. The entire metro area has 2,844,000. So it's a big metro area. The city only has about 585.
And also keep in mind, a lot of these places, they have, it's like there are places outside the actual city limits where people live. And even though you may say, for example, my sister, she lives up in Cleveland. Well, actually, she lives in Avon. Okay, Avon's outside of Cleveland. So, but it's still, 10 minutes away from Cleveland. So keep that in mind.
5 right now. But the metro area, when you take all their stats, is normally about the same percentage lost as the city itself. Number 3, Shreveport, Louisiana.
I've been to Louisiana. I've never been to Shreveport. I've only been to New Orleans.
This one is a little bit different. It doesn't have the horrible stats like some of the other places. Don't get me wrong. The stats aren't great, but they just don't excel in suckage in all of them. I'll give you an example. Their crime rate is only 128% higher than the national average, and their violent crime rate is only 105%. Again, that's compared to what else is on this list with like 400% above the national average. So they're not terrible. Their unemployment numbers are a surprising 7% lower than the national average. They're only 4.3% right now. The problem is the jobs they have suck.
Yeah, that's probably what it is, the jobs. I was just thinking about that.
They're not good paying jobs. They have no good paying jobs in this place. I shouldn't say no good paying jobs. I'm sure someone's going to leave a comment that I make $50 an hour doing whatever. Yeah, most of the city. Like I'd said before, the national average for median household income is $55,000. They're $34,000. And they got a poverty rate that is about 26% above the national average. Lack of opportunity is what's killing Shreveport. This is another strange thing about this place. Whenever I say something negative about a city or something like that, like Toledo, nobody ever brings up Toledo. Nobody ever defends Shreveport. No matter what I say about that place, if it's negative, everyone agrees with me. It's really...
Yeah, I've never been to Shreveport, so I can't really defend it or give my 2 cents worth on it. But it does sound like a typical place down in some places in the South. And also in the United States, you'll find cities like this.
Really strange. Watch, now I'm going to get an email from like a city council person or something like that, defending the place. They always invite me down there to see what they're doing. I don't know why. Why would you want me to come there? I just talk total trash about your city. Shreveport hasn't had many census where they lost population. I mean, this one in the 2010 census and the 1990 census. That's it. Every other census, they've gotten double-digit growth, at least. And in 1870, they got 110% growth. From 2010 to 2020, Shreveport lost either 5.9% of their population or 6.9%. On the census, there's actually 2 numbers, and there's got an asterisk there, and I think there was a correction. I'm not totally sure because they didn't give details. Strange. But either way, 6.9, 5.9, somewhere in there. I emailed this census. I guess I'll find out. I don't know. They haven't gotten back to me. But regardless, Shreveport had 199,000 and they dropped down to 187,000. Number 2, Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, the old punch.
Yeah, Mississippi was eventually going to get on this list. It seems to be on all of his lists. So when it comes to dying cities or something that are as bad in the United States.
Back Jackson, Mississippi. They never show up on a good lists. If I ever make a list about capital cities where you can get shot, bit by a mosquito, and sweat through your t-shirt all in one day, I bet they'll be number 1. But today, they're number 2 when it comes to people flocking out of this place. The only thing that isn't bad here is cost of living and amenities. So there's plenty of things to do, and it's relatively cheap compared to other cities. If you have a job, you might be able to do some of those things, but not many people there have jobs. Their unemployment rate is actually 69% higher than the national average. It's a 8% unemployment right now. Their household income is 41% lower than the national average. Their crime isn't terrible. Total crime is 113% higher, and their violent crime is only 98%.
They don't sound too bad. I'm wondering what the reason is why people would be leaving Jackson.
Percent higher, which is incredibly good because 2 years ago, it was 170% higher than the national average. Area Vibes gives their schools an F, and their housing market gets an F too. From
Education and housing market.
2010 to 2020, Jackson, Mississippi lost 11.4% of their population, taking them from 173,000 to 153,000. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. We'd like it if you went over there and subscribed. All that good stuff, there's a link down below. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, go ahead. And after number 1, I'm going to explain why some of the cities you probably thought were going to be on here aren't. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan is in
back up to Michigan.
Bad shape. Has been for a very long time.
I'm trying to think if I've ever been to Flint. I may have been to Flint one time, but I wasn't too impressed with it.
If you're from Michigan, or
not that you have to impress me, mind you,
or that part of the country, or if you watch this channel for long enough, you know Flint hasn't been doing good for a very long time. They could be like the poster child for what happens to a city when an industry leaves, and that was the auto industry here. Prior to 1970, Flint only had one census where they lost population, and that was the 1940 census when they lost 3.2% of the population. Then 1970 hit when the jobs started going away, and it's been downhill since then. 1.8, 17.4 they lost in 1980, 11 in 1990, 11% again in 2000.
Jobs is probably the big thing with Flint, is what he's saying.
18% in 2010, and then this last one, they lost 20.7% of their population, taking them from 102,000 to 81,000. So they won't be on this list next year because the cutoff is like 100,000 residents, and they started off in 2010 with 102, and now they're not making the list, but we put them on anyway because they had such a drastic drop. They're leaving for all the basic reasons. Horrible job situation. Their unemployment rate right now is 12.1% higher than the national average. It's like 160% higher. Their household income is 54% lower than the national average. And when it comes to crime, this is kind of funny. So their total crime is only 38% higher than the national average, but their violent crime rate is 255% higher than the national average.
Okay, they have the whole kit and caboodle there. It's not good jobs, not good housing market, probably not good schools to go along with it. They have high crime and high violent, not really high crime, but high violent crime. So yeah, people aren't going to stay in places like that.
Their property crime is actually lower than the national average. You know why? Nobody has anything worth stealing in this city. That's just weird. That's the only one I've ever seen where one of the crime stats is actually lower than the other two, if it's, that drastic. On top of all that good news, you could still get poisoned by the water in Flint, Michigan. I think that's one of the first things they're going to fix on this new infrastructure thing the government has going. Hopefully, that's a horrible story.
I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.
A horrible situation. Over the last 7 years, they have been replacing a lot of those pipes, and they're kind of getting closer to the end of that, but it's still a bad situation.
Okay, I think there's the places that most people would have thought would have been on this list, and I'm just taking a guess here. I don't know what to say. I've never seen this video before. Is cities in I mentioned Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York City. I'm sure there's those are the places that, at least right now, people are leaving in droves. People are leaving the state of California in droves. In fact, Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, actually put a commercial in Florida saying that people are going back to California because it's much better. Well, it's not. It's a complete and utter lie, and he knows it. Okay, he's just a terrible governor. But again, that. I think a lot of the cities on here would be California, where people are leaving in droves. Also, New York City, because there's a lot of crime, and it just goes unpunished in those places.
All right, that's today's list. But before you go, let me explain why a couple cities that you probably thought would.
And also keep in mind, this was also done, I think, November 2021, which is not a year yet a year. But and a lot of what's going on in like New York City and California right now. Well, California, it's been going on for a while now, but New York City, we'll see.
Would be on the list aren't. This video took into consideration the whole census, the whole 10 years. Places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, I guarantee everyone that watches the news thought that they'd be on here for sure. Well, if we did it on the last 2 years, they would be. Los Angeles in the last 2 years lost 0.32%, which for Los Angeles, that's bad. They've gained people since forever. Chicago in the last 2 years lost 0.51%. And San Francisco lost 1.39%. Now that's just in the last 2 years. But prior to those 2 years, they gained so much population, they still came out ahead. Now, if the trend that they have going on right now continues, yeah, they'll all be on the list in 10 years from now. Along with New York, they're in the same situation. They lost.
Well, the three cities that I named, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York, he's naming right now.
People the last 2 years. Prior to that, they'd been gaining people. All right.
Okay, 10 fastest dying cities in the United States. This is from the World according to Briggs. Please click like, share, and subscribe for him, and please click like, share, and subscribe for me. Not the greatest list that I always like to talk about, but I thought I'd do it for my channel. But thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.